I mean, it just kind of honestly shattered me. There's what we present to the public. There's your life at preschool, and there's like this, kind of normal, happy childhood white picket fence. And then there's this dark thing happening over here that I didn't have words for and that nobody was talking about. If the trauma you've lived through that's affecting you the most is rape, and you have something put in your body like that, I mean, it feels re-traumatizing. You don't get to control what goes into my body.
Yeah.
I get to control what goes into my body. Okay, well, now I can't be totally in control. Now I'm just going to be totally fucking out of control. I love this question, and I'm going to tell you why I love this question. It was so dark because I was drinking, I was drugging, I was binging and purging. I really started to develop the belief that I was insane, even though I actually was not. And there was a counselor in there. Oh my God, I'm going to start crying. Every time I talk about him, I start crying. The further and the deeper that I actually got into my body and the safer that I felt, the more the things started to turn on. At the end of the day, it is about coming home to the truth of who we are. Such a good question. I actually think, and sometimes I feel scared about how I will be perceived as a person who is doing what I do, who struggles with this. I think what I really want to say about this too, that's like so powerful, is
I have never heard anyone describe it in that way. That was wow. That was beautiful. Hey, this is Em Hollis, and welcome to the messy truth of transformation, where it's okay to be magical and messy. This isn't your typical personal growth podcast. Around here, we talk about the real stuff, the raw, the honest, the shadow work, the spirals, the breakthroughs, and the beautiful chaos of becoming who you were always meant to be. If you've ever felt alone on your healing and growth journey, or you wondered why it feels hard even when you're doing the work, you're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. Let's dive into the messy truth of what it actually takes to transform your life. Today, I'm sitting down with Julia Phoenix, who is a spiritual leader and mentor. She helps her clients activate their dormant DNA, birth their own unique healing modalities and methods, and create thriving businesses from their soul gifts and fulfill their deepest spiritual missions. She's the creator of the Rapid Shift Integration, an innovative method for multidimensional healing and DNA activation. Julia has a background in child development and a master's degree in human development. She is an expert in inner child healing and shadow work. She's been an online healer and successful entrepreneur since 2015 and currently lives in New Mexico with her fiance and 2 cats. Let's dive in. Julia, welcome to the show.
I'm
Thank
so
you for
excited to
being
be
here.
here.
I am so excited. I was just saying off camera that when I was going through the podcast applications and I read your story, I was like, this woman needs to be on this podcast. I mean, messy moments. When I read your story, I was like, this is exactly what this podcast is about, is share people in leadership positions, sharing those moments. It's like, those are the things that led me to become who I am today and do what I do today. It is because of those messy moments. So
Absolutely.
welcome to the show. Super excited to have you here. And I really just want to dive straight in. And I always love to start to give our audience a good context for who you are and your work. I like to start from the beginning. So if you could tell me about the first 5 years of your life and how that really shaped who you are today.
We're going right there.
We're going
I mean,
there.
I think the first 5 years of life, I think you might have read in my application form or my bio or something that I sent you that um, I have a background in child development and a master's degree in human development. So I personally feel like the first 5 years is the foundation of everything for everyone. So probably we should just talk about that. But that is, that is the place to start. So I had a very difficult, very early life, and it's taken me a number of years to piece together some of these memories. And I think that's important to say, because there are a lot of people out there that if you were to ask them this question, and I'm sure people have said this to you before. They're like, I don't remember. And they might give you, I was born here. This is where my parents worked here, because it's something people have told them. But when it comes to their embodied lived experience, it's like it's not there. Well, it is there. It's actually just filed away in a filing cabinet back here somewhere, right? So it wasn't until my 20s, really, and I'm going to be 40 next month, that I started to unpack and really peer into some of those filing cabinets, and I started to remember some of the things that happened in my
Mm,
very early life. And
mm,
so one of the things that happened that was profoundly, shaping of my entire experience was that I was incested by my father, beginning at age 2.
mm.
So, when you're 2 years old and this type of an experience happens for you, I mean, obviously your brain and your body and your nervous system, you're at such a vulnerable state in terms of your development, and such a malleable state. um it absolutely shapes everything about the way that you perceive the world and reality and yourself and your body. And I mean, it just kind of honestly shattered me.
Yeah,
It kind of just
yeah.
shattered me. So I kind of went in a million different pieces.
Mm,
And my family, we lived in the Bay Area in
mm,
California, right? So San Francisco Bay Area. um Relatively successful parents together, kind of nuclear family. What was interesting, this has been true throughout my life and my development, is that everything looked really good on the outside,
mm,
you know?
mm. Yep,
It was like 2 cars in the
yep,
garage, my dad
yep.
has his own company, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And we
totally.
kinda seemed like, yeah, this, like, sorta, like, all-American family. um, and there was also aspects of my experience that were very, like, I can return back to these moments, and I can feel the essence of who I was as that
Mm,
young child, and there was, like, this brilliance and this softness and this sensitivity and this aliveness and this beauty, that it's miraculous and amazing to me how I retained a lot of that, and how I was able to have those experiences at the same time as this was going on, right? But
mm,
I remember, like, playing in the garden and with my fairy friends, and, like, having this kind of relationship with angels, and pretending to be Madonna and dancing around in
mm,
my room,
mhm,
so, like, on
mhm.
in some ways normal
Yeah,
childhood stuff, and
yeah.
kind of had some of my essence really still intact. So the other thing that was going on during this period of my life, that was a heavy influence, is that my parents were involved, my family was involved in, like, this Eastern spiritual organization that had a lot of shady stuff
Mm,
going on behind the scenes, you could say, and very corrupt sort of leader. So a really salacious word to use would be cult.
mm,
Whether or not you want to use that word or argue about the definition, I don't know. But what I will say is that there were some very dark spiritual influences in my early life as well,
mm, mm,
and just some dark influences that were coming from that organization. And
mm,
but it is so confusing, right, for a developing child, because there's all of that happening, but this was not an experience where we lived full time, like,
mm,
inside of the organization. Like, I went to, like, a normal preschool, you know? Like, there
yeah,
were so many elements of my experience that were removed, so it was, even from a very, very early age, sort of like this split life, like a double
wow.
life. That
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
really the experience. It was a double life. It was like, there's what we present to the public, there's your
yeah,
life at preschool, and there's, like, this, kind of normal, happy childhood, Silicon
yeah.
Valley in the
Wow,
90s type of, you know,
wow.
prosperity and, whatever, white picket fence.
Yeah,
and then there's this dark thing happening over here, that I didn't
Mm,
have words for or
mm,
and that nobody was talking about.
mm,
So that's what shaped my
mm,
my
mm.
development.
Wow. And I believe, if I read correctly, there was something else that probably shaped you, and I have personal experience with this because
Mm.
I grew up with a stepmom. My dad and my stepmom got married when I was 3 years old, who had type 1 diabetes, and so I
Ah,
grew up
yeah.
firsthand and saw the toll that it took not just on her, but me and my dad too, and I
Yeah.
believe you have type 1 diabetes as well, correct?
I do, yes. For
Yeah.
me, interestingly, that wasn't triggered until
Mm.
a bit later. So I was a
Wow.
teenager before I was 19 actually before
Wow.
that um developed for me. So,
Wow.
type 1 diabetes, it's such a range, right? Like that you can be
Mm.
some people get it turns on when they're born.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
some people,
Yeah.
it's like I've known people who were diagnosed up into their 30s with type 1.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. I don't hear of that
it's
more
rarer.
often. I hear of yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I have so many questions. The spiritual community that your parents were a part of, how did that was that something that you were a part of? Did you guys meet? Was it like
Not by
how did
choice,
that work?
but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We would stay for longer periods of time. Again, this is kind of a salacious word, but I would call it like a compound, you know? It's
Yeah,
kind
sure.
of like where
Yeah.
people live, like, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that actually lived there, but then there were
Yeah.
people who would visit and come and go. So I did spend a lot of time in that environment, but also that environment was really woven into my home environment as well,
Mm,
if that makes
mm.
sense. Like those
Yeah, totally.
influences
Totally.
it was still very present. So similar in some ways to like people who probably would speak about being in like the Jehovah's Witnesses
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like this. It's like, people can argue about like, is it a cult or not? Cause like they let you leave technically, like,
Sure.
um,
Sure.
right. But, and it's this experience where it's like, you don't live at the temple, but it is going to infiltrate your home and it is going to be a part of your worldview and how you're raised and all the things, right? So it was a little bit like that.
Do you feel like there was any good parts about it that were helpful, or is it just
Yeah.
sort of a really dark phase of your life?
I love this question. And
Oh.
I'm going to tell you why I love this question. Most people don't ask this question
Mm.
because most people like to see these types of things in black and white because it makes them more comfortable. And in my lifetime, I have not had that luxury. you know, because yes, there are good things. There were good things about my family. There were good things that I experienced and there still are, right? And I think that there are good things about any cult.
Mhm.
Otherwise, no one would join. Like,
Exactly.
if it was
Exactly.
just like hellish and horrible and they were like, we're going to take away all your freedom and brainwash
Yeah.
you and do terrible
Yeah.
things to your kids,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
who would sign up for that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just like organized religion too, same thing, right? Like
Right.
there are beautiful aspects. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And so but this is also what can make it so insidious if we're talking about spiritual abuse or cult abuse or like these types of high control religious and spiritual groups is that it is insidious because there's a lot of truth woven in with lies. There's a lot of it's like there are real spiritual teachings that like I grew up knowing certain things or at least parroting certain things that I now actually believe like that's true,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like
Mm.
there are parts of me that are like I am so glad that I kind of knew that at a young
Mhm.
age, right? That was
Yeah.
taught to me because that is
Yeah.
true,
Yeah.
right? And there were
Absolutely.
beautiful things. What I loved most about it was and this is still something that I love most really about like any religion or spiritual practice is when they're singing. Like even if I
Mm.
were to go to church and there's like the
Mhm.
worship and
Mhm.
oh my God, take me to church and I'll
Yeah,
I'll do
yeah.
like singing the name of God all
Yeah.
together in a room.
Yeah.
I love it. There's something
Yeah.
so powerful and so magical and beautiful.
Totally.
And so when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I would just jump up and just like, oh, I loved it so
Ah,
much. Right.
yeah.
I'm always going to remember that as well,
Mm,
you
There's actually
know?
so much science around what music and singing in particular does to the
Yes.
body and the brain. So, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So let's fast forward a few years. And when did the behaviors of what was going on
Mm.
internally, when did those start to sort of manifest into some dysfunction?
Yeah. I mean, I would say so around 8 years old for me. My father had, it was interesting. So this was actually around the time that the sexual abuse with him stopped.
Wow.
From what I've pieced together, what I believe is that it stopped at around this time, but he had a brain tumor and got very sick at this time, right? And so there was this big shift that kind of happened when I was 8. I also I started developing physically really early. I got my first period when I was like 10, but there was this period of time where I was
Wow.
like, yeah, so where I kind of like I got a bit bigger, before stretched out, like this kind of thing, right? And so I have this very vivid memory of standing in my parents' bathroom and lifting up my dress. It's so vivid. I remember the dress that I was wearing, it was like this little red, dress. And I remember pulling up my dress and looking at my stomach. And I don't even know where I
Mm,
got this idea that I was fat. I mean, it was the 90s. It's like TV. My mother probably, talking about her own body. I don't know. But I remember having this thought of like, if I could just be thinner,
mm.
somehow everything would be okay. Like, and it's like just somehow everything would be okay. And I don't even know where I got the idea to do this, but that was the first time that I remember throwing up my food.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I was 8. It didn't continue, like, I didn't have full-blown bulimia from like 8 to whenever. It was kind of sporadic, but this is the answer to your question. Like, that's kind of where
Wow.
I like the coping
Yeah.
mechanisms
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
started really kicking
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, yeah. And so walk us through how that built into a full-blown heroin addiction eventually and being you were in treatment for bulimia if I'm
Yeah.
remembering correctly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and anorexia. So the way it sort of worked for me is like I had many coping mechanisms that I sort of picked up at different times, and I would have phases where it was heavier on one than another, if that makes sense. Is
Totally.
so right. So, around age 12, 13, I was cutting, um, a little bit of bulimia here and there, but it wasn't
Mm,
really big. And um, I wasn't very much, I guess I want to say, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Like, I wasn't well able to restrict my food at that time. Like, I had a lot of overeating. So the
mm,
anorexia wasn't really in the picture then. It was
mm,
more so
mm,
overeating,
mm,
occasional um, purging and cutting. When I got kind of into my teens is when drugs and alcohol kind of entered the chat, and I was like, this is great. You know, this is so good. I just want to do as much of this as possible, right? And there was a period of time where uh it was also tied up in sort of like fun with my friends. There was a
sure.
sense of, right, like going out and party. I mean, we were really young to be doing the stuff that we were doing, like dropping ecstasy at the park with like some 20-year-old guys when we're like 14. But this was what me and my friends did. You're like, that movie 13? I don't know if you've ever seen
I
that.
don't know if I've seen that. Maybe, maybe. I mean, I'm like a movie buff, so it sounds familiar.
Okay.
This sounds
I
like my
mean, maybe if
life.
you read a blurb, you might not need to yeah, maybe if you lived
Yeah.
it, you didn't even
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
watched
Yeah.
it and I was like, "This is a little too close to home."
Close to home. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was like that movie, if any of your
Yeah.
listeners have seen that movie,
Yeah.
it was like
Wow.
that. So, um, and there was yeah, again, there was a period where it was sort of just fun and I mean, not just, right? There was obviously, we were all, I think, trying to escape sort of messed up home lives and looking back as, someone my age, I am like, wow, we were so young. I'm sure you've had the same experience or similar
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
Thought we were so mature.
Mm-mm.
Just can't even imagine.
Yeah.
These are just
And
babies, like
and when this
yeah.
is happening and these coping mechanisms are happening on and off, do you know, like, this is probably a way to cope with the incest? Are you talking to family members, your mom? Like, does anybody know sort of what's
No.
going on? No.
No, definitely not. And
Yeah.
as I mentioned, a lot of those younger memories were sort of split off from my conscious
Mm,
awareness at that point in
mm,
time.
mm. Yeah.
So I didn't even know why I
Yeah.
felt the way that I did and why things felt. But there were certain things, there were other traumas that happened for me. I probably should have mentioned this as well, but I had an abusive teacher when I
Wow.
was 10. So there was psychological abuse, as well as sexual abuse with this situation. So I had some conscious awareness of certain things that
Yeah.
had happened, but I didn't have a language and I didn't
Mm,
have safe spaces and no one was available. There was no way for me to really articulate my experience and there was no one that really felt safe for me to articulate it to. When I was
yeah.
16, my dad got sick again, this time with prostate cancer. And
Wow.
also around this time, I believe, my mother was having an affair. So there was this was another period where there was shifting energy at home and this is when the anorexia sort of took hold. I also had a breakup with this kind of puppy love boyfriend that I was close to in that time, that I was with for a couple of years. And I went to the I went to my pediatrician.
Wow.
I was like 15 or 16 with my mom. And so I was like 155 pounds. So 5 pounds above the normal weight range according to the BMI for my age. And she
Mm,
sent me to Weight Watchers. So I went to Weight Watchers and there I learned how to count calories. And this just snowballed quickly. Like I finally felt like I had something to control. And I became very obsessed. At first, everyone was telling me, "You look so amazing," because I lost a lot of weight. And in the beginning of me losing weight, it was, "Wow, we're so proud of you. You look so amazing." And then it started to get like, "Wow, this doesn't seem healthy. You don't look
mm,
okay," and I just was
mm,
going less and less and less and less.
mm.
And so by the time I was in college, it was really bad. And I was
Mm,
very underweight, dangerously
mm,
underweight, was diagnosed with type 1 in college. And of course, the diabetes care educator at 19. So the diabetes care educator is sitting across from me trying to tell me how to read a nutrition label.
wow.
And I'm like, "You're trying to tell me how to read a nutrition label?
Right,
I do that all day long. I understand
right.
how to count my carbs."
Yeah,
But then it was like this other thing that was on
wow.
top of what I was already dealing with, and there was
Yeah,
no support with that, right?
wow, wow.
So it was crazy by the time I got to my junior year of college, I was so sick I could no longer continue, and that's when I went to treatment for the first time. Yeah,
So tell
in that
us
time.
tell us how that journey was for you. Was it helpful? Did you gain anything? Was it how long was it? Was it inpatient?
I feel like I could write a book about my treatment
Yeah.
experiences alone. I did go
Wow.
inpatient. So I I have very mixed experiences and very mixed feelings about that time in my life because on the one hand, it definitely did probably save my life. And was it helpful? Absolutely, yes. There were seeds that were planted, there were awakenings that occurred. At the same time, what would I necessarily say this was a really healing environment? And if I were to design treatment centers, I would do it just like this? Not necessarily. It was
Right.
also terrifying. I mean,
Mm,
horrifying because what you
mm,
have when you have people who have severe eating disorders is you have people who have an issue with trauma and feeling completely out of control.
control.
And this is their one thing that is giving them a sense of control.
Yeah.
And what the treatment centers typically do is they take away every piece of
Everything.
control that you have. So
Yeah.
it's not just the food that is now not controlled by you.
Yeah.
It is also, you can't go to the bathroom alone. We're going to tell you when to eat, sleep, and shit. We're going to tell you what time to go to sleep. We're going to tell you where to be. And so it's like, I get it. I get that the structure is helpful. I actually experienced that as more helpful in drug and alcohol recovery, this
Mhm.
level of structure. But
Mhm.
for someone with this level of terror in their body,
Yeah.
because there's a very high co-occurrence as well of eating
Mm,
disorders in
I think
general
I
with
knew that.
sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very
Yeah.
high. So it's
Yeah.
because it's like, you don't get to control what goes into my
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
I get to
Yeah.
control what goes into my body.
Yeah.
You see?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
when you take that away, all of the trauma comes up. And so people had better be really skilled at
Yeah. Yeah.
holding that and knowing
Yeah.
how to work with that. And that wasn't always my experience. But
Experience.
am I happy that those experiences occurred? Absolutely. It was needed. It was a needed part
Yeah.
of my path. So the first center that I went to, I was having such severe stomach pain in the midst of all of this, and I was having such a hard time eating. Like I just could not get food in, that they put me on a feeding tube. So I had a
Mm.
feeding tube forcibly inserted like through my nose. And so you can imagine too, like if the trauma you've lived through that's affecting you the most is rape and you have something put in your body like that,
Totally.
I mean, it feels re-traumatizing and then you can't
Mm.
control what's going in. So I've got
Mm.
this backpack that I'm literally a backpack that I'm carrying that has liquid nutrition in it that's connected to this feeding tube. And I hear this whirring noise every 5 minutes or so because it's administering that, right? It was like, this was horrifying, right? This aspect of this process for me was absolutely horrifying. And then I'm looking in the mirror and I'm starting to see weight coming back on my body and I'm starting to really freak out. But because I was doing so poorly at that treatment center, they actually sent me to a different treatment center. So this treatment center is where I turned 21. It was bigger and it was a higher level of medical care. So it was more like a hospital setting.
Mm.
And of course, they're always going to be concerned about me because I have type 1 diabetes, right?
Mm.
There's
Mm.
higher risks involved, and right. But what's interesting here is that I don't know what it was about this facility. Maybe because they're actually, I don't know. I don't know if they just looked the other way on certain things or what was going on, but there were still a lot of people acting out in their disorder there. And I
Mm.
actually came in not knowing certain tricks of the trade type of a thing and learning a
Learned.
lot,
It's like prison.
right? About
Most of
how
the
to
people that
like
come out of prison, like, know more about, like, crime
exactly.
than yeah. Yeah.
Yes, so it's like, here's how to make it easier for you to purge your food, and you gotta eat
Wow.
things in this order, and,
Wow.
like, here's how you, like, hide the food, and, like, here
Wow.
you gotta eat the colored things first so that you know when it's all out, and, like, all of these things that so when I came out, I had gained weight and I had an awareness that there was some emotional stuff that I needed to work on, but I had not gotten to any kind of core of what that was. And I still did not have adequate support or anything like this. And I had a lot of new information about ways to engage the behavior. So that is actually when bulimia is
Mm,
like a pendulum swing, right? So
mm,
going from this extreme restriction of anorexia all the way to this extreme sort of expression of I'm out of
yeah,
control
yeah,
of
yeah,
bulimia, right?
yeah.
And this also went along with increased alcohol. I mean, this was the alcohol and drugs kind of came back in because
Wow.
that was all connected to this kind of archetypal experience that I was acting out of. Okay, well, now I can't be totally in control. Now I'm just going to be totally fucking
Mm.
out of control.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so this was
Swinging to the other
actually,
end. Yeah.
yes. And this was actually the darkest. This was the darkest period of my life that I have clear conscious recollection of is like 21 to 23.
Wow.
It was so dark because I was
Mm,
drinking, I was drugging, I was binging and purging. I was now no longer in school, so I didn't have anything to focus towards. I had all this trauma that had kicked up, but I didn't know what it was really. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't
yeah.
and so I was just acting out, and it
Mm,
was also during this time that I had multiple suicide attempts.
mm,
So I tried to kill myself 3 separate times
mm,
by taking pills.
mm,
You would think that after the first time and it didn't work, maybe I'd look at some other methods, but
mm,
I didn't. This was I
mm,
was like,
mm,
"This is the way
mm.
I wanna do it." But it didn't
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
Uh, Instead, I also was in and out of psychiatric wards because of those attempts and because, it was like I was 5150'd multiple times, and then I was
Mm,
in, like, an outpatient
mm,
psych treatment thing. So I'm in these psych wards with people who have really severe mental illness and stuff,
wow.
and I really started to develop the belief that I was insane, even though I actually was not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
I was just really struggling.
Yeah.
And, you
Yeah.
know, when you grow up in a dysfunctional household, often if someone is expressing like symptoms like this,
Yeah.
it is so much more convenient and so much easier for everyone to also tell the narrative that that person is just crazy.
Sure.
Like, that there's
Sure.
just something wrong, like, they're
Yeah.
sick, they're crazy,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
something wrong with her, there's something wrong with her
Yeah.
brain, we don't know why
Yes.
she is this
Yeah.
way, right? So
Yeah.
I internalized all of that,
Yeah.
and this was the darkest time of my
Mm,
life.
mm. And so I would love for you to tell us about how that eventually led into your heroin use. Tell us about the first time
Yes,
that
yes.
happened.
Yeah, so it was easily accessible to me through a connection that I have, which I'm not gonna name because I don't need to do that, but it was easily accessible to me. It was around me, but I
Mm,
had never picked it up
mm,
until I must have been 21 at this time. I met a guy. Yeah, I think I went out to a bar with him and I was date raped essentially. So
mm, mm,
this brought back up for me all of
mm.
the unprocessed trauma and everything in such a dramatic way in my system. And here's what it really was. I actually had a boyfriend at the time. And so, should I have gone to this bar with this guy? Like, should I have been hanging out with this guy? Probably not. I mean, I was 21 and traumatized and an alcoholic. Like, I give myself a lot of grace for this, but the guilt that I felt and the shame that I
Mm,
felt, especially when I told my boyfriend at the time about what
mm,
happened, and his response was, "Well, why were you with him to begin with?" And to be angry at me and to break up with me, it was like I could not cope. So I had the again, like, this is one of those really clear moments. I have a few of
yeah,
these along my timeline where the
yeah,
memory is just crystal.
yeah.
So I'm sitting on my front porch and I was like, well, I could try to kill myself again, but that hasn't worked. I think I'm just going to do drugs until I die.
Wow.
And that's how I'm going
Wow.
to do it. And so I used for the first time that day. And I was like, "Yep, I'm definitely just gonna do this till I die." Like, it was a conscious choice. This is what I'm gonna
Wow.
choose.
Wow.
Mhm.
Like a slow, painful death as opposed to,
Y Yeah, but I was like,
yeah,
"Well, I might as well be hot," like, there it felt weirdly like just relief to completely check out of even having to
yeah,
participate in that.
yeah,
Makes
yeah,
sense?
yeah, 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 completely. So take us through, from that moment, from that day up until the day that you got actually clean and actually help. Like, what was the next, I don't know, 10 years or so like through that process?
Mm.
And what were some of the darkest moments? And what was the moment that you were like, I cannot do this anymore?
Right. Well, thankfully, it's a pretty short story because I could have continued on for a lot longer than I did probably with heroin,
Mm,
but
mm,
because of the type 1 diabetes,
mm,
uh, and because of the like, other things that were going on, I kind of crashed and burned very,
mm,
very quickly. Because I I
mm,
I mean, I would just wind up in the hospital. Like, I would just not it was like it was very quickly within about a 2-year period. I got to a place where it's like, I need to stop doing this or I will die.
mm,
Versus there are addicts and alcoholics that can go on and
mm,
sort of function in different ways for
mhm.
10, 20, 30, 40 years. And I
Yeah,
am actually really grateful that that
yeah,
wasn't my experience. I'm grateful
yeah,
that I got brought, all the way into that choice point of, I really like, this is really it. Like, I need to get clean or I'm going to die so quickly and so young. So I was
yeah.
23 when I
Mm,
got to that point, and there was just there I had just dried up every resource mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and it was at the point where if I didn't use for a few hours, I was violently ill.
mhm,
So that's a
mhm,
terrible way to live, and if you
mhm.
are every day it's also exhausting, people don't talk about
Yeah,
this enough. It's
yeah,
actually so exhausting to be
yeah,
like, "I have to today wake up and I don't know where I'm
yeah.
gonna get the money, I
Yep,
don't know where I'm gonna
yep,
get" right? But
yep.
I've gotta find this, otherwise I'm gonna, you know,
Yeah, get sick.
it's like a yeah, it's like a
Yeah,
full-time job.
yeah, it totally is. Yeah.
So, I'm grateful at this point in my life, I still had a relationship with, with my parents and with my mother,
Mm,
and she supported me getting into rehab.
mm,
But it was definitely like, "You will not stay at our house or use any
yeah,
of our resources unless you do
mm,
go into rehab." And
yeah,
I didn't have, I mean, I was looking at being on the street without that, so
wow.
this was a big piece of it. I don't know if when I went into rehab, it was like I had this big moment where I was like, "I'm gonna get clean and change
Yeah,
my life." It was kind
yeah,
of just like, this is the only thing that's available for me to do right now
mm,
other than be sick on the street, and I
Yeah.
really just don't know I just don't wanna do that, and I'm just fucking exhausted. I'm just
Yeah.
fucking exhausted.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
how I
Yeah.
went into rehab when I was 23.
Yeah. Wow. And what happened in that rehab? Was it successful? Did it change the trajectory of your life?
Absolutely, it did actually.
Yeah.
I have been clean and sober since then. So this was
Wow.
Valentine's Day 2009 is my
Yeah.
sobriety date, and I didn't pick
Wow.
Valentine's Day. That was just
Yeah. Happened to be
when
the
I happened to
Yeah.
roll my case
Yeah, yeah.
in
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just show
Yeah.
up all haggard, right?
Yeah.
It was a beautiful experience in a lot of ways.
Mm,
I find drug and alcohol recovery to be similar in some ways, but also very different
mm.
to what is required for successful eating disorder recovery.
Mm. Mm.
So I needed a loving structure. I
Yeah.
needed a reality check. I needed to
Yeah.
be called out a
Yeah.
lot and kind of
Yeah.
shaken awake. And there was a counselor in there. Oh my God, I'm going to start crying. Every time I talk about him, I start crying. There was this counselor in there. His name was Jim. This was a little rehab in San Jose. It was like out of just a Victorian house in a residential neighborhood, through my parents' insurance. And Jim would smack you upside the head and just shake you awake with the truth bombs, right? Like he could be very firm. Like he would be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" You know? But he cared so much. He cared so much. And we had a special connection. He was the first person in my life that he might have been the first man I ever really felt safe around, to be honest with you.
Mm. Mm.
And
Mm.
he was the first person to ever really convince me that I was smart and that I had some things going for me. He actually believed in me. And he said to me one time, I remember, he said, Julia, you're going to make it out of here. Like, you're gonna make it, and I don't know if you know the statistics, but it's like 10% of people who leave rehab and stay clean. Most of the people I was in there with, if not everybody else, did
Mm.
not stay clean. But he said, "You're going to stay clean," and he believed in me, and I really loved him. I really loved him. So that was really special, and there were a couple of other counselors in that rehab as well that said some things to me that really landed. And I found 12 step. I found,
Mm.
people that I could connect to where we could share stories about our addiction. And I found a lot of hope.
Mm.
It wasn't a perfect experience, mostly because I was still struggling very badly with my eating disorder. And
Yeah.
they didn't know how to
Address
navigate
that.
that with me.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, what actually ended up happening at that specific facility was that I was essentially kicked out
Mm.
after a couple of months because I could not stop binging and purging. I just couldn't
Mm.
stop.
Mm.
And they did not have the tools to support me. The same thing happened in my sober living environment after
Mm.
I left. So, it would be some time before I was able to successfully tackle that issue. It
Wow.
requires different things,
Yeah. Yeah.
than drug and alcohol recovery
Yeah.
requires. But by and large, that was the point that my entire life trajectory shifted. Those 2 months I spent at that place.
It's amazing to me. I've been a coach for 6 years. I've had lots of coaches, have changed my life and have,
Mm.
tools on top of tools on top of tools. And it's so amazing that the simplicity of being held and being safe and being seen can heal so much.
Yes.
For him to just
Yes.
hold that space for you, you know?
Yes. It was absolutely tremendous. It was absolutely
Yeah.
tremendous. Another reason why it makes me so emotional is that he passed away
Mm,
in 2016. So now
mm,
he's
mhm.
like my little recovery
Mhm,
angel.
mhm,
So
mhm.
he's
So
around.
so
But
tell us about what it finally took then, because that was gonna be my next question. Was that
mm,
the point that the eating disorder stopped too? But it sounds like it was a little bit
yeah.
before.
Yeah, no, it didn't all stop at once. And in fact, what I want to say about eating disorders is that it's very rare that I have met someone that their story is like it kinda goes like, "And one day I woke up
Mm,
and I stopped and I
mm.
just never did anything weird with food ever again." Like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
just whereas there
Yeah.
are people who get sober and then they never touch alcohol
Yeah,
or drugs
yeah,
again,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's been my journey with heroin and drugs and alcohol. I
yeah.
have not picked anything up
Wow,
in 16 years in
wow,
February, it'll be, so
wow.
15 years
Yeah.
plus. But my journey with the eating disorder was not that way, and I think part of that is because, you are constantly contending with food. I
Mm.
never have to see heroin ever
Yeah,
again for the rest of my
right,
life,
right, right,
you
right.
know?
Do you know who Glennon Doyle is? Have you ever heard of her?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
I know
she
her.
talks a lot about her struggle with an eating
Really?
disorder from a very young age, and in fact, she had a relapse like 15 years after nothing. She
Yeah, I'm not
I think
surprised.
early 50s, yeah, had a relapse. She's very vocal about that.
I'm so glad she's talking about it, I think
Yeah.
it's important because, I had a sponsor actually early on in my
Mm,
sobriety journey who also was bulimic. So that did
mm,
help me a lot. But she
mm,
told me the only people who never recover from eating disorders are the like bulimia are the ones who stop trying. And she
mm,
told me it requires so much perseverance because when you
mm,
have an episode, you have something come up,
mm.
you literally have to pick yourself up off the floor and just say, "Okay, let's try again today," right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I did a lot of that. I did a lot of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then I experienced another bad breakup. This is a trend, right? This is a trend. I had a boyfriend from when I was in, early in my sobriety. It was a really sweet relationship. We actually kind of helped each other get sober, which I know
Mm,
that they say not to do, but it was a beautiful soul contract. I'm really
wow,
happy that we did that together. But, we
yeah,
broke up and in that process, the bulimia, it kind of got really bad again. So it kind
mm,
of I would have periods where it would be a little bit dormant. Like I remember
yeah,
one time I think I had about 8 months without doing it.
mm,
Earlier in
yeah,
my sobriety. And again, this sponsor was sort of helping me. I was going to therapy, things like this.
mm, mhm,
But then after I had this breakup, I mean, I spun down and it got bad, 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 like
mm,
binging and
mm,
purging 10 times a
mm,
night in the middle of the
mm,
night, throwing up blood, losing pieces of my teeth, just bad. So I had a sponsor at this time who, despite my resistance, she was like, Julia, you have to go back into treatment.
wow,
So I did. And that was a big dark night of the soul moment and a big surrender
mm,
moment, but this
mm,
place, my experience was very different. I think number 1, I was sober.
mm.
Number 2 was, I was more mature. I
Yeah, I
had
was gonna
worked through
say,
some stuff in therapy, right? I
yeah,
was older, I was
yeah,
26, right?
mm,
And I was a lot more willing and I was a lot more desiring of healing for this condition.
yeah,
And the
yeah,
facility that I went to which was in San Francisco, it was a good fit for me at the time.
mm,
It was
mm,
small, it was all women,
mm,
uh, there were different forms of therapy that I really resonated with. They had yoga,
yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah,
it was
yeah,
a safe
yes,
place for me
yeah,
to
yeah,
land and start to work on some of this stuff,
yeah,
but it wasn't long into that experience that the trauma memories really started to
mm,
surface.
mm. Mm, mm.
So that was really the beginning of that journey of being able to uncover and unpack a
Work
lot of that.
through. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would love to sort of shift the focus, although now it sounds like the next phase of really working through all of that stuff happened. And so now you are a leadership and liberation mentor, DNA activation specialist, rapid shift integration method is something that you've created, I believe.
Yes.
And so obviously I know that all of these experiences, the reason why I lay that sort of groundwork for our audience is because I know all of those things lead into the person that you become, the leader that you become, the coach that you become, the business owner that you become, especially when it comes to your spiritual gifts. So I
Mhm.
would love for you to take us through how all of that culminated into the next phase, which was activation of your own gifts and recognition and awareness of them,
Mhm.
and then actually leading to, can I use these on myself to heal, but then can I take the next step and use these to start working with healing others? So I'd love for you to sort of walk us
Mhm.
through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of wild because I tell people my whole story and then I'm like, and now I do galactic light codes. And
Yeah,
they're
right.
like, what?
Yeah.
How did you get there from
Yeah.
what you just shared, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's part of the power of what I can present. It's like however dense and however dark and however deep down we can go is also how much light we have the capacity for. And so I've really in recent years started playing more in the light, but my career started 10 years ago. My career as an online, coach and healer, and it was very different what I was doing then. So I
Mm,
was trained more to facilitate inner child work,
mm.
and I was working more with people who had trauma, right? I was
Yeah. Yeah.
which tracks from the story, right? It's like,
Sure.
of course,
Sure.
I want to
Yeah.
help people with the methods that helped me to heal from my
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah.
And I worked with some people who had eating disorders or
Mm,
different things that I'd struggled with. And it was very fulfilling for me. But I also began to sort of expand beyond it. And it was a
mhm,
gradual process for me
mm,
to
mhm,
expand beyond that. I started
mhm.
focusing a lot on relationships. So for a while, I was a relationship coach
Mm,
because uh, I mean, I mentioned kind of jokingly, the relationships were always the thing that kind of triggered a lot of
sure.
behavior for me, and that was
Yeah.
another addiction of mine as well, which we didn't really
Yeah.
get into, but I
Yeah.
had some very catalytic and very difficult relationships, as many people with trauma
Yeah.
experienced, right?
Yeah.
And I cared a lot about that. And I also met my partner in 2016, whom I'm still happily with.
Yeah.
And I wanted to help women like me
Yeah.
to find that type of love and connection and support no matter what they'd been
Yeah.
through. But
Yeah.
my gifts did start waking up and coming online more and more. I think for me, the further and the deeper that I actually got into my body and the safer that I felt,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
more the things started to turn on.
Yeah.
So for some people, they have these gifts and abilities that almost become it almost is like a mechanism that their system has where they can dissociate into that place. And they're just in the realm of spirit, and they're just, like, in
Yep.
multidimension, and they're just fi
Yep.
and this is so as to avoid being in their body, and I've worked with
Totally.
people like that as well, right? And
Yeah.
their journey
Yeah.
is like, "Okay, I've got all my gifts open, now I gotta come
Yeah.
back into the body." For
Yeah.
me, it was kind of the other way around,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
so
Yeah.
I was doing, like, somatic therapy, and I was doing all
Yeah.
this work to heal my trauma, and then I just started having because I was connected to myself,
Mm.
and just because of what I now understand to be the natural process of DNA activation, which is like
Mm.
the turning on of the light body, right?
Mm.
And my spiritual, because everything that I shared this is all my spiritual journey. I don't see it as
Yeah.
separate. It's not, I don't, this isn't my trauma journey, my trauma healing journey, my recovery journey, so much as it is my spiritual journey. This is just how
Totally.
my spiritual journey has looked, right?
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
all my spiritual journey. And so then
Yeah.
new things started to open up and come online. And of course,
Yeah.
given my upbringing, because there was
Mm.
so much of this stuff around this spiritual,
Yes.
I had
Yes.
so much resistance to it. I didn't want
Mm.
anyone calling me psychic. I didn't want to talk about the realms because I I also had such a bad taste in my mouth for any kind of spiritual bypassing.
Spirituality. Yeah.
And yeah, and any kind of denial of the human
Mhm.
experience, the emotions, the relational experience. I could not tolerate the idea that I was one of those people, and I just kept getting reflections and reflections, and I just kept getting it's like,
Wow.
"But Julia, like, this is who you are.
Mm.
You are this person, and when you're not
Mm.
expressing these gifts that you have and you're not utilizing them and you're not deeply embodying them, how can you be in integrity with what you're
Mm.
doing? How can you be in integrity with what you're teaching?" Because I cared about authenticity. That's what I cared about, right? I still care about that a lot. It's what healed me. It is what brought the divide together. It's what brought me back to myself, back into unity with myself, back into truth. So I care about authenticity, and it just started to really strike me that it wasn't authentic for me to be
Mm.
denying this side of myself, and so I began exploring it more, and I dissolved resistances to it layer by layer. And I did end up working with a mentor back in 2022, a couple of mentors who helped me to develop this modality that I have now.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
that helps people activate their light strand DNA and reconnect to the truth of who they really are, to their divinity. Because I think, again, this spiritual journey and what it's looked like for me, it's going to look differently for everyone. But at the end of the day, it is about coming home to the truth of who we are. And regardless of what we've been through, how we've been programmed to see
Yeah.
ourselves or who we believe ourselves to be, we are
Mm.
like these powerful, limitless, divine beings. And the work that I do now really, I feel, helps people have a tangible experience of that
Mm. Mm.
to
Mm.
anchor them beyond trauma, programming, fear, lack, all of these things.
Yeah. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit more, um, if you're okay with sharing, about the DNA activation process. So it sounds like biological and sort of science-based, but that also sounds very mystical and spiritual. So I'd love for you to explain to us like what the process is for one of your clients and what
Yeah.
the results are on the other side. So like what happens in their life, what happens to them when it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, DNA activation is happening for everyone on some level. It's part of what, in my opinion, humanity is going through in our evolution, and it's a natural evolutionary process. There are, we can call them interferences and different things that have kind of come in that that prevent this process from unfolding more
Mm.
naturally, right? But there are ways that DNA activation does happen without intervention. One
Mm.
example I always like to give, because some people really will relate to this, is like if you've ever been intuitively called to travel to a specific location and you don't know why. And then you get there and it's like you have this experience of something opening inside of you. Or, you have this kind of spiritual experience just from being on that land. Well, it's because land actually activates dormant DNA.
Mm.
So
Mm.
this can happen at any time. It can happen through uh, soul contracts that we have to meet a specific teacher or
mm,
a specific partner that we might um, have a soul connection with. You can experience
mm,
these sort of spontaneous activations.
mm,
But somebody like myself is actually going in and clearing distortion more sort of
mm,
manually and
mm,
and assisting that process in accordance with the highest and best for the individual. But just
mm.
backing up a little bit here to just
Yeah,
foundationally share even
yeah,
what this is. When
yeah,
most people think about DNA, they think just in terms of the physical DNA, so the double helix, right?
yeah, yep,
And there's a lot of power even in that. I'm not trying to
yeah,
diminish the physical DNA. There's
totally.
also a lot that science still doesn't understand about the physical DNA. They can tell you what about 2% of it is and why it's there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yep,
it's
yep,
kind of this really important yet
yeah,
highly mystifying thing.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
also something called light strand DNA, or it's
mm,
also called soul DNA or etheric DNA, depending on who you talk to. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but
yeah,
it is non-physical DNA.
mm,
It is
mhm,
woven into the
mm,
physical DNA, right? But
mm,
it is our expanded
mm,
consciousness,
mm,
how it kind of maps out into not only our bodies, but also our energy fields. And inside of DNA, it has tons and tons of information. And we know
yeah,
this even about the physical DNA. There's
yeah,
all of this coding in there,
yep,
right? All of
yep,
these complex sequences. And it tells us like the eye color that we have and the hair color and whether we might get type 1 diabetes or not, right?
right, right,
So it's this powerful sort of compact source of information that
mm,
impacts our expression. And the same is true for the light strand DNA.
mm,
It contains spiritual gifts and abilities. That's one
yeah,
thing. It contains planes and states that we can have access to, right?
mm,
So
mm,
when I look at DNA activation, I am actually looking at it in terms of this is the awakening process.
mm,
It's just it's kind of going down to the nucleus, so to speak,
mm,
of
mm,
how that awakening process is activating and
mm,
happening. And the
mm,
implications to answer that question are honestly limitless. This can look really
yeah,
different for different people, but some of the
mm,
most common things that I see
yeah,
are gifts and abilities coming
okay,
online. So,
yeah,
maybe you couldn't hear your guides before, or you felt disconnected from the realm of spirit. And all of a
mm,
sudden, you're talking to your dead grandmother,
mm, mm,
at
mhm,
4 a.m.
mhm, mhm,
So there's that.
mhm,
An ability to access more light is really what
mhm,
it is at its core.
mm,
So this can mean like you're accessing just higher states of consciousness. So I feel a greater sense of oneness, of
mm,
lightness, of ease,
mm,
of flow
mm,
in my day to day life. One of the
mm,
most common pieces of feedback that I personally get is mental clarity,
mm, mm,
the ability to hear and delineate like what is programming from what is truth, the ability to be connected to truth versus programming versus reaction. And the implications are endless. And for different individuals, it can be like health, all kinds of things. But
yeah,
it's like we're
yeah,
working with the building blocks
yeah,
of your form and frequency expression.
yeah, yeah. I have 2 questions that I don't wanna forget. This is fascinating to me.
Mhm.
So, the first question is, so after you work with somebody, a client, and you do a DNA activation, is there an integration period where they have to maybe do some different things, exercises, practices in their life, or is it like that's been activated and this is who I am and this is how I move forward. That's the first question. The second one, you sort of answered it, but helping them delineate between, like you said, the old patterns and behaviors of the conditioned self and then who they actually are as their essence,
Mhm.
their spirit, their
Mhm.
soul, as you talk about. How do you help them differentiate between that? Do you use this DNA activation or do you still feel like doing that sort of inner child work, shadow work, like getting rid of the trauma? Do you feel like they still need to do that? Or does this DNA sort of help just dissolve that?
So that's a great question. It really depends on the person because each
Mm.
process is really individual. So it depends. Like there could be some people who come to me, and I actually really love working with people like this. They've done like 20, 25 years of deep dive therapy and trauma work. And you know what I mean? They've done
Mhm.
all the personal development things.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
once we do a session, it's like, pew, and they're kind of right. And
Mm.
that's really fun and
Mm.
that's cool. But for most people, it's not really a one and done. They're going through a process of transitioning, and we are all as a
Yeah.
humanity going through this process of transitioning from a
Yeah.
dense sort of carbon-based structure to like a crystalline structure in our
Yeah.
bodies and energy fields, right? So it's a process right now, and we're
Yeah.
all feeling that because there's this kind of like boomeranging
Oh
period,
yeah.
like there's this period that feels like chaos. And so for a lot of people it's like, okay, I feel that clarity and that light and that openness and that connection. And then the next day, maybe I don't, right?
Mhm.
I don't know how
Mhm.
to hold that.
Yeah,
And
totally.
so there are going to be like, I think your instinct is really spot on. You're kind of picking
Yeah.
up on like, there probably needs to be integration. There probably needs to
Yeah.
be things that we're doing to keep
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
keep these pathways
Yeah.
on and
Yeah.
really to anchor this in, and that's really true for a lot of people. What I
Yeah.
will say is that once a DNA pathway is turned on, it's turned
Mm.
on.
Mm. Mm.
So it's like what I do, this is the metaphor that my guides are kind of giving me right now. So it's like if you were to go in a room with a broken light bulb, so that it's
Yeah.
just never turning on.
Yeah.
There's no light in the room.
Yeah.
And then you go in and you fix the light bulb. You
Yeah.
install a new light bulb and then you can turn it on and it's like on, right?
Yeah.
Well, you can still flick it off,
Totally.
but the light bulb is functioning, so you can turn it
Yeah.
back on again. Right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of like
Yeah.
that. It's like once you
Yeah.
have that reference point,
Yeah.
it's you're always going to be able to return back to it. And once you and the more that you return back to that state and you activate those pathways again and you open those pathways again and oh yeah, I
Absolutely.
remember I'm being a play, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever that is. And for some
Yeah.
people it's going to be like eating certain foods, walking on the
Totally.
earth, doing energy
Yeah.
work every day,
Yeah.
whatever the things are, meditating. A lot of
Yeah.
times I'll give intuitive instructions for the individual because it's going to be
Yeah.
different for people. But all of
Yeah.
these things can serve to keep everything lit up and turned on
Yeah.
and open.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar to neuroplasticity, right? When we start
Right.
building new neural connections in our brain, we have to keep them going. We have to, or we lose them, and then it's then we're
Exactly.
not, we're not the person with the new neural pathways. So it's sort of like the same thing. It sounds like it's like, yeah, I
Exactly.
will help you with the activation. It's like having, doing a psychedelic, like you get the insight, you get, you have this experience and then, yeah, but you got to keep that active and keep that open and keep moving with it. So it's like kind of sounds like the same thing.
Yeah, it's really similar in a lot of ways. It's like that
Yeah.
pathway opens, and I know a lot about this because of addiction recovery and reprogramming
Yeah.
my subconscious from trauma and
Yeah.
everything. Those new
Yeah.
pathways, sometimes at first it's like, what is this? This is
Yes.
like
Yeah.
hard. And you're like,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
but then it
Yeah.
becomes more familiar. It becomes
Yeah.
less weird, you know,
Yeah.
and over
Absolutely.
time, then it just becomes a natural state of being
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
stays.
It's like your default then becomes now
Mhm.
that. Yeah. So it sounds like at some point you shifted, and correct me if I'm wrong, from working with individuals to working with people in business. And really, it sounds like helping women in their business with their spiritual
Mhm.
gifts, putting themselves out there.
Mhm.
And so, what was that like? When did you make that transition, and why did you make that transition? And what is that thing that you are the most passionate about right now in working with female entrepreneurs, it sounds like?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I may be going through another shift around this soon. I'm not really sure.
Mm,
Because I'm always open for my work and who it's for to really be evolving.
yeah.
And and I've had this sort of focus towards business for a while. I think it's
Mm,
really natural to want to offer support and teaching and advice around things that we are passionate about, and I love
totally.
business.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
and I love
Totally.
women
Yeah.
who also love business.
Yeah.
And I also think, from a broader perspective and more of
Yeah.
a sort of a higher self perspective too of why this
Yeah.
matters, is like women like you and women
Mm,
who are out there on the leading edge of consciousness and who are helping humanity, working with them, they're going to impact a lot
yeah.
of people. So the impact of that
Absolutely.
work is really
Yeah.
exponential.
Absolutely.
And of course every person impacts but I think it's leaders,
Yeah.
it's people who have influence, right? It's
Yes.
people
Yes.
who are
Yes.
here on a mission. And
Yeah.
so I think whether or not someone has an online business or is really identified with being an entrepreneur, you could still be a
Yeah.
leader. So that might actually more so be the
Totally.
thread.
Yeah.
It's so hard for star seeds with like marketing and like the language.
Oh,
I'm like, oh God.
I hear you, sister. I'm like, I will
I'm
not fit into
always
that box.
it's so hard. And then you're like,
Yeah.
you think you have the thing, and then like 2 months
Oh,
later, you're like, I
totally.
gotta redo
Nope,
my whole
that's it.
website.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Oh, I hear you on that
Yeah.
for sure,
Yeah.
and, like, I think
Yeah.
it's a natural thing as we personally grow and expand and learn new things to then
Yeah.
wanna help others in that process
Yes.
because things work for us, and of course, naturally, we wanna share that with people, so I completely
Yes,
understand you in
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, and I do
Yeah.
think there's so with business specifically too, what I love about this focus is that I do have sort of a love of freedom. And I
Mhm.
do believe that women with big gifts should be
Mm.
paid well for what they're doing and
Yeah.
should not feel capped in any way or trapped
Yeah.
in any way inside of something they've created or
Yeah.
inside of something somebody else has created. But I think that
Yeah.
when it comes to the level of liberation that I want to see a lot of trailblazing starseed women like
Mm.
yourself really
Mm.
have in their lives, and the ability
Yeah.
to impact lots of people and live a
Totally.
really good life,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. Like it just
Yeah.
is, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And so, how do you work with women that are wanting to share their gifts with the world, and they struggle? And I
Mm,
believe sometimes in many spiritual communities, it's like money and abundance and wealth is looked at as a really bad thing. Like you
yeah.
shouldn't be charging for your gifts, and so how do you work with women and getting them just comfortable? Is it working with the DNA activation? Do you use other
Mm.
tools to help them move into their yes, I want to be of service, and yes, I want to be paid well for what I
Mm.
do?
Such a good question. I actually think part of it is standing in the frequency and modeling it myself. That's probably the
Mm,
first thing.
love that.
There's a whole activation that people have around just what I charge and the
Yeah,
fact that I'm out there saying this is what it costs to work with me.
yeah,
And and they're like, how do you do that? You know?
yeah,
Uh,
totally.
you know, so that's
Yeah,
probably the first piece, but it really depends on the individual and what their specific hangups are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes this is religious
Yeah.
conditioning. Sometimes this
Yeah.
is ancestral. There are different layers that we can work with here. So I also work with ancestral and past life programming inside of the DNA that's impacting the energy bodies, that's impacting, I mean, this stuff impacts the thoughts that we have too. I mean, people think the thoughts are just this standalone thing. They're not. They're just a way that energy is expressing. So if you change the energy, you also can change the thought. And I know some
Yeah.
people do it the other way around,
Yeah.
but there's different entry points. So some of
Yeah.
these beliefs, these thoughts, they actually just go
Yeah.
when you clear the underlying
Mm.
foundational frequency. And some of this stuff you can find coded in the DNA, that
Mm.
there are like these lack programs or
Yeah.
poverty programs,
Yeah.
even vows. Sometimes this is like also ancestral, vows that are there. There's all kinds of things that can be impacting this for people. So what I love to do is actually just go in with the individual and see where their thing is. And sometimes it's
Mm.
childhood.
Mm.
Sometimes it
Mhm.
is inner child work that needs to happen, and sometimes it is
Mhm.
that you just actually need to feel like it's safe and it's okay for you to be in your full power and receive, and maybe because of some trauma that you experienced, you don't believe you're worthy of that, or you don't feel
Totally.
safe to receive, or whatever. So it really just depends on the individual, but as you can see, I have a very multi-layered approach.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
go as down deep into the
Yeah.
the kind of shadow bucket as we need to
Yeah.
go, and I
Yeah.
can go as much into this kind of out there
Yeah.
multidimensional world as we need to go.
Which I think is so important because everybody's at a different place in their journey. So it sounds like
Yes.
you're able to really meet them where they're at. I used to always say you can only take people as deep as you've been willing to go in your whole life, in your own life,
Yes.
and on both ends of that spectrum, right? Exactly what you're saying. It's like I
100%.
can only take you that deep or that high to the places that I've gone, and so I love that. I love that you
That's
work
right.
individually with people, meeting them where they're at. And so obviously, Julia, you're somebody that like works on herself and her growth and her expansion all the time. You wouldn't be doing what you're
Yeah.
doing if you weren't. So what is a messy moment that you still struggle with? Like what's something in your life that's like
Mm.
you're currently working through or on? And I ask that because again, the point of the Messy Truth of Transformation podcast is that people don't see, they see you and they and very easily can give away their power and go, "Oh my gosh, like she must be fill in the blank," right? We do it with lots of
Right.
leaders. And instead when we're able to connect and go, "Actually, we're on the path too. We're on the journey too. And this is my world
Of
is working on
course.
myself." I think it helps people relate and resonate and go, "She can do it, so can I."
Absolutely, and just so people know, I had, like, 18 things come into my mind just now when you said that.
Perfect.
Because there's things like my life isn't
Yeah.
perfect, things aren't perfect, like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's beautiful, but not perfect. But the thing I think I really want to share that's coming up the strongest to kind of share
Yeah.
that feels important is that physically in my health, despite the fact that I do all this work with DNA and I do really
Yeah.
powerful energy work and all the things,
Yeah.
I have some health stuff that I'm still
Yeah.
puzzling on and that I'm still really
Yeah.
working through. And part
Yeah.
of that is, living with type 1 is always just kind of a challenging thing. But I also have a chronic pain condition that I have lived with
Mm.
for about the last 14 years. And
Mm.
there's reasons why I do not mention this frequently. Number one, I
Mhm.
do not want to identify with it
Yeah.
as me because it
Sure.
is not me. It is something
Yeah.
that I'm journeying with. It is something that is initiating me. It is part of my
Yeah.
spiritual process. I don't want to
Yeah.
lock into it as like an identity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I 1000% believe that it is temporary.
Yeah.
I 1,000,000% see and have always seen the timeline where it goes. Like it's going.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I have days where I'm in a lot of physical pain
Mm. Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
still really navigating that. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's really tough. And
Yeah.
sometimes I feel scared about how I will be perceived as a person
Totally.
who is doing what I do, who
Yeah.
struggles with
Yeah.
this because people do judge, and
Yeah.
especially around a lot of physical stuff. There's so much judgment, and there's so much judgment in the spiritual community, and it's like, "Oh, she must not have done her trauma work." Can you imagine? I have done so much deep fucking trauma work to get where I am. Like, they're like, "Oh, have you ever looked at your trauma? Maybe you have PTSD."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Or like,
Right.
"Oh, her diet must be horrible," or,
Yeah.
"Oh, she must be
Yeah.
really in limiting beliefs," or, "She must not have
Yeah.
tried this or that," or,
Yeah.
"She must not have she must be in a really low vibration," or, "She must have,
Mm.
you
Mm.
know, really bad karma," or, "She must have an
Oh.
entity." Like, these are things I've, like, heard from people.
Oh,
People do
wow.
this about people who have weight issues, right? So there's
Yeah.
all of this judgment that, like,
Yeah.
I just don't want to necessarily open myself up to. This is
Yeah.
why I don't share
Totally.
about it a whole lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I don't necessarily want all the unsolicited advice, but, like, it's a truth
Totally.
of my
Yeah.
experience. And I
Yeah.
think what I really wanna say about this too that's, like, so powerful is just as I shared that this entire life experience that I took you through, which I don't know if I've ever gone through, start to finish like that with anyone in the way that we did. The same way that I said that that was all my spiritual journey, my health conditions are my spiritual journey. And I believe we have
Yeah.
soul contracts to walk with certain things, to understand them at
Yeah.
different levels,
Yeah.
to meet our true selves more deeply, and so that we can come out the other side with more lived wisdom. And I don't see this
Yeah.
as different. I see this again as an initiation. And so this is
Yeah.
something I really want to leave the listeners with too, is that if they are struggling with any of the things that I mentioned today or something totally different, this does not mean that you are off your spiritual path. It means you are completely on it usually.
Mm. Amen, sister. Amen.
Yeah.
That is literally was the whole intention behind this is like if you're in the messy middle, it's not because you're doing something wrong, it's because
Mm.
you're doing something right. It's because you're doing something.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. So,
I love it.
before we wrap up with my 3 questions that I leave the audience with,
Yeah.
we just spoke on it, but how what would you say to somebody right now that is in that messy middle, that is, like, maybe having a dark night of the soul and things are falling apart and they're like, "Oh my god, what is happening?" Like, "I'm doing this work and it's supposed to be getting better." What can you share with them if they're in that space right now?
I would say that the most powerful position is surrender.
Mm,
This is something that I have learned in my life again and again because it is in those moments where we are so broken and there is nothing left to do but surrender. The moment that I'm calling a treatment center to try to get in, these moments, that is actually when we are closest to source. That is when we are closest to our God self
mm,
or closest to
mm,
God, however you want to think about this.
mm,
That is when we are the very closest to our creator. And that is where we
mm,
have all of the power. It's in that moment that all of the light can now enter. But what we tend to want to do is I don't wanna go that far down. I want to buoy back up and tell myself it's not that bad and enroll in this marketing course and, whatever the thing is that we're gonna do that's actually keeping us from that bottom. I would
mm,
say just let yourself fall all the way fucking through that thing. Let yourself fall all the way through, and you will come out the other side in a place that you could never have imagined, but it will only happen when you just allow yourself to go all the way down.
mm.
That's been my
Julia,
experience.
I have never heard anyone describe it in that way. That was wow, that was beautiful. I mean, to say
Thank you.
we are actually the closest to God, or fill in the blank with whatever word you wanna use
Yes.
in that moment that's the most
Yes.
desperate is like, whoa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So I always wrap it up with 3 questions. And the first one is, what is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Oh, wow. The best piece of advice I've ever received. That's such a good question. I don't know why I'm totally blanking. I'm like, I have so much wisdom,
I know.
but
I know.
what is
Yeah,
some
I put you on
advice
the spot. Yeah.
that I have received that is the best? I mean, probably something close to what I just shared with you.
Mm,
Like, stop just to stop trying to hold it all together, like, let
mm,
it fall apart, I
mm,
remember this moment when it was one of these moments in my life. I've had so fucking many, where the shit was just hitting the fan. It was so bad, and I'm in my car, and I'm just parked somewhere, and I'm bawling, just
mm,
bawling, and, I called a friend of mine, and I was like, "I'm so sorry, I'm just like, ugh." And she says to me, "Julia, sometimes things are just fucked."
mm.
And I know that's not, like, necessarily advice, but it was, like, one of the
It's true.
best things anyone had ever said. She was like,
Yeah.
"Just let it be fucked.
Yeah,
Like, you
right,
don't
instead
have
of,
to
like,
make
having
sense
some
of it."
profound yeah.
Yeah, like, you don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to make sense of it. You don't have to pull yourself out of it. You don't have to extract some wisdom from it right now.
Yes,
Like, just
yes,
let it all just be fucked. And I was like,
yes.
"It's fucked." So,
I
yeah, just
love
let it
that.
be fucked. That's
Just
that's
let it
really
be
the best
fucked.
advice.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. That is
yeah.
so on the other end of that, since we talk about going from one end to the other, what is the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Oof. Fake it till you make it.
Oh, wow.
I
Yeah.
hate that one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they
Me
used
too.
to say it in 12 step a lot. They say it a
Yeah.
lot in personal
Oh, wow.
development.
They say, I know they say it a lot in personal development. I didn't know they used it in the 12 step.
Yeah, they say it
Wow.
all over. Fake it till
Wow.
you make it. I am not
Wow.
into it. I mean, if it
Yeah.
works for somebody, that's cool, but it
Yeah.
never worked for me. And
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. Same. So last question is, if you could go back to one of your messiest, darkest moments,
Mm.
that version of you now, what would you say to her in that moment?
Ooh, I bet you get people crying on this one all the
Mm,
time.
mm,
I think I would go back to that period in my early 20s because that was when
mm,
I really could have used, like,
mm,
somebody to
mm.
care and encourage. And I would just tell her, "You're gonna make it out of this. You're gonna make it out of this, and it's gonna feel differently. It's gonna be better. You're gonna find people that are gonna love you. You're gonna find people that are gonna love you. You're gonna find places that you feel safe in, and you're gonna make it out."
Mm,
That's what I would
mm,
do.
mm.
Whew.
That's beautiful. Oh, and sometimes it's just fucked.
And sometimes it's just fucked. It's okay for it to be fucked. I
Yeah,
probably would also tell her, like, that there wasn't anything wrong with her because that was that
mm,
time in my life where it was like everything it was like I'm just this horrible, miserable, fucked up person, and that's why I'm behaving in all these ways. I might as well behave in all these ways because I'm just this
totally.
crazy person, right?
Yeah.
And I would just tell her that's not who you are. I know who
Mm,
you are. You're not
mm,
that.
mm. I love that. I think I think so many people can just hear that right now themselves where they're
Yeah.
at. So, yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, Julia, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I know the audience will gain so much value, and like I said, just for me, it's like doing this is just to help people not feel so alone, to make them, to help them not feel like something's wrong with them or whatever. It's
Yes.
like, I think now more than ever, we need to relate to each other and see each other and be with each other. And I think that's what you did today was really just be able to be with our audience and show your true self, your authentic self, and all the
Yeah.
magic that happens
Mm.
on the other side of that too. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you so much. If somebody wants to work with you and feels, that calling to do this, to work on the DNA activation or whatever it may be that they feel called to work with you with, how do they get a hold of you, contact you, work with you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much. And thank you for, this beautiful service that you're doing and for really being on your mission in this one. We need
Um,
you. We need this. Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate this space so much. And if
Yeah.
people want to reach out to me or connect with my work, they can find me at juliaphoenix11.com, or they can go to my Facebook or my Instagram, Julia Phoenix on Facebook, Julia Phoenix 11 on Instagram. That's about it.
Awesome. I'll put that in the show
Mhm.
notes and description as well. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode, and we will see you next time.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to another episode. If this episode resonated in any way, I would love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with somebody who's in the thick of it too. If you want more behind the scenes or you want tools to support you along your journey of messiness, come hang out with me over on Instagram at mhollis_thesage. But most importantly, just remember the mess is part of the magic.